Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really big topic and we have a lot to cover and lots of experience here on the call. And so I'm very excited. One of the reasons that we invited Bill to join us today, he joined us, oh gosh, a couple of events ago at our boot camp to talk about insurability, which is such a hot topic these days. And especially if you follow ATRI, the American Trucking Research Institute, they issue their top industry concerns report every fall. And number three on the list, the rising cost of insurance. It's coupled very closely with lawsuit abuse reform, of course, and then we're all feeling the pinch here in this market, this economy. So there's lots to talk about. Bill has deep experience in this world, in enforcement for a very long time. Then I know, Bill, you were with a safety director with, in fact, one of our client fleets, and then most recently with Nirvana Insurance and doing your own consulting as well. So a lot of history here and experience here from many different angles for transportation. So we are just so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And as always, Mark Ray. Hello, Mark.
Hello,
Over
everybody.
30
How's
years
everybody doing today?
experience from Mark Ray with Lisa Motor Lines. And boy, it's going to be a good conversation. Please hop into chat really quickly. Let us know where you are and feel free to drop your questions. We're going to do the Q&A there at the end. But any questions you have, we'll try and get to in the webinar. And if not, we'll answer them afterwards. And with that, Bill, thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Lydia, and thank you, Mark. Thank you both for having me here today. It's good to see everybody jumping on and seeing where y'all are from. That's great to see. Again, my name is Bill Dorfner. I'm with Coastal Reconstruction and Safety, and as Lydia shared, I got a background in pretty much every aspect of the trucking world, from enforcing it to being the safety director to being a part of insuring, and now as a safety consultant for safety managers and trucking companies as well. So very happy to be here today and to talk about kind of the state of insurance with the trucking industry. And I know that's a big concern for everybody. Lydia mentioned ATRI, and this is a quote from ATRI that says the trucking auto liability premiums have actually risen by 36% per mile in the last 8 years, even though truck crashes have gone down by every year for the last 4 years. So insurance premiums are going up, even though trucking companies are doing a better job of operating more safely. And I will take this to another level. I've actually seen 36% increases in 1 year for some fleets. So it's a serious problem, and we're going to talk about why, and we're going to talk about how to get you the best possible renewal every year with your
Thank
insurance
you.
company.
We all need that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard at boot camp a couple weeks ago, one of the fleets there said they had clean loss runs and still they got, I think, just over 20% increase on their premium. So it's rough world out there. So yes, please, any tidbits we'll be glad to take.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to share. And one of the questions I used to get from our fleets all the time is how can we lower our insurance rates? And the sad reality of it is it's almost impossible to lower your insurance rates. So the term I would usually try to use with them is I'm going to try to help you get the best possible renewal that you can get. Maybe it's a flat, maybe it's a lower percentage, maybe it is lower. That would be phenomenal. But here are some things that I've learned over the last few years that hopefully will help you out as well. The reason that insurance companies are taking these increases every year is, first of all, they're losing money. Rising claims severity, and also the nuclear verdicts. And we talk a lot about the nuclear verdicts, but what we don't talk as much about is why claims in general are just becoming more expensive. And if you think about a vehicle that you're driving these days, if you hit a 1978 Monte Carlo, it wasn't going to cost nearly as much as if you hit some of these vehicles now with all these sensors and higher end parts, and even just to replace a headlight where you could just go to get a bulb in the past, to replace a headlight now is hundreds and sometimes even thousands of dollars on some of these vehicles. So everything is getting more expensive, and insurance companies are starting to lose money because of this. So they are starting to tighten their underwriting standards. They're making it harder to get the best rates possible. There's more of a focus on your safety culture and not just what you have on paper. And also, there's an increasing expectation that you're going to share your telematics data with them. And some insurance companies are focusing very, very heavily on that, and even underwriting mostly on the telematics and secondary to those more traditional factors. So that's a very newer trend in the insurance company, and it's becoming more and more prominent.
No, are some insurance making it a condition of renewal to have telematics?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are some insurance companies that will not even give you a quote unless you connect your telematics with them so that they can see the data and they can see what your drivers are actually doing out there on the road, and not just looking at roadside inspections and claims history. And we're seeing that more and more actually in more of the traditional insurance market as well. At first maybe it was the insurtechs that were looking at that, but now you're starting to see more traditional insurance companies getting involved in that data sharing. So it's definitely a growing trend in the trucking industry. Um, Here's the thing. As a trucking company, you obviously want to keep your rates as low as possible. And in order to do that, you want to put yourself in a position where insurance companies are competing for your business. Um, if they have to compete for your business, if you're a good risk, they're going to compete for your business, and they're going to have to keep lowering their rates to get below the competitors. So you want them to compete for you, and we're going to take a look at how some of that can work. First of all, let's talk about underwriting for a second. Underwriting is essentially risk storytelling. It's looking at who you are, what you do, and how you do it. This is where the picture is painted of your company and how your story is told. So they're looking at your type of operation, who you are, what do you haul, what kind of equipment do you have, what are your standards for your drivers. They're looking at how you run and what kind of safety controls and culture that you have in place. Do you actually have a good, solid set of policies or driver guidelines? Are you actually supervising your drivers? Are you using technology that's out there to help you operate more safely? And finally, what are your results? The proof is in the pudding in this case. What's your loss history? What does your data say as far as your CSA scores and so forth? And they get this information. Some of it is internal and some of it is external. Internal is obviously they're going to ask, any insurance company is going to ask for your last several years of loss runs. They're going to want to see your claims history. They're going to want to look at your CSA scores, your inspections, any reviews that you've been under. And then if you're your current insurance company, they're also going to look at the premium they've taken from you over the last several years and also what they've had to pay out, which comes into your loss ratio. Have they actually made money on you in the past, or have they lost money? Then external, obviously they're looking at, again, your SMS data, your inspection history, MVRs of the drivers, and any litigation history, if there's anything currently pending as well. So let's take a look at some things that drive your premium and your term. All of this determines how much you're going to pay, how long, and things like, what are your deductibles? And so forth. They're looking at how many units you're running, how many miles you're running, and what you're hauling. Again, loss history, driver quality, safety management, and your regulatory compliance. And I want to talk about safety management. They're looking at the training that you have, they're looking at the policies you have, and they're also looking at whether or not you actually enforce the policies that you have. All of these things drive your premium and what kind of terms that you can get. And along those lines, one of the biggest levers that you have available to you is training. It's one of the few things that you can actually control. We all know there are some things out there that you can't control. You can't control every verdict of what a jury is going to say. You can't control what the road conditions are. You can't necessarily control what your driver does behind the wheel once they get behind the wheel. But some of the things that you can fully control is who you hire, which is your driver qualification process, how and when you train, and how you actually enforce your policies, and whether or not you actually coach your drivers after there's an incident or a violation or something along those lines. All of these things are completely within your control.
And I'm curious, to interrupt for a second, how many in chat, just a show of hands or, a quick a quick chat, how many of you all are not only involved in safety, but also in hiring? Are you recruiting as well? Because I know everybody wears a million hats in their role these days. So let us know if you're involved as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, Lydia, because having talked to, hundreds of fleets out there, um, there's such a wide range of safety managers out there. There's your third party, safety management consultants that are out there that maybe have multiple clients, but are also handling, your account. There are some that are, part-time, or, maybe there's a full-time dedicated, well-trained safety director. But I would tell you that the majority of the ones I've come across, safety managers are wearing multiple hats. They're doing safety, they're doing some accounting, the driver qualifications, HR. They're handling all sorts of things, and it just kind of becomes overwhelming sometimes.
Claims management too.
Claims management, exactly. Yes, absolutely. So let's talk for a second here about how training actually impacts your claims. You know, Claims can happen, and how how you do your training can affect that. So first of all, we look at frequency and severity. Frequency, is those things that are happening consistently. How often are you having claims? I've got the picture up there. How many days has it been since your last accident? If you're constantly erasing that number and putting it back to zero, then you have a real problem with claims frequency. Some of the things that you can work on with your drivers to decrease the frequency of your claims are talking about following distance and speed management. Obviously, you don't want to be rear-ending vehicles, bumping vehicles, things like that. Talking about defensive driving and hazard recognition, not just responding to things that happened, but anticipating that something's going to happen. One of my kind of side careers is I do some driving instruction. And when I talk, especially with the younger drivers, I tell them all the time, you have to expect the unexpected. When you see a vehicle up there that's, waiting to turn out onto the road that you're on, you just have to expect that they're going to pull out in front of you and be prepared to respond to that. So hazard recognition training is very, very important, even with professional drivers who have been doing this for a long time. Things like backing, lane changes, and intersection skills. We see a lot of right turn squeeze accidents. All of those are very, very frequent, and there is training out there that can help reduce the frequency of those things, along with fatigue management. And now let's take a look at severity. These are the ones that are costing you a fortune and that are costing insurance a fortune as well. These are the things that make every incident even more severe and more expensive. Things like cargo securement and rollover prevention. A vehicle having to pull off to the side of the road is one thing. A vehicle pulling off to the side of the road and then rolling over gets really expensive and also more dangerous. How you respond to your incidents. What are your post-crash protocols? Do you have training in place so that everybody is on the same page of what to do, what to say, what not to say, and how to respond when an incident happens? And in those moments, it is critical and can make or break a claim as far as being in control or a claim going out of control. Seatbelt usage is a big thing. Obviously, it can make a claim far more expensive if a driver is ejected or if a driver is tossed around versus if they're in control in their seat. And also coaching from telematics videos and telematics or from videos or however you do that. The question is, and the question is going to be asked is, how have you responded in the past to incidents? Has this incident occurred in the past, and how did you respond to it? And if you didn't respond to it in a proper way, then they're going to show that this is a pattern. So it can make the claim and the payout far more severe than what it should be.
And this is that storytelling you were talking about, is that you have to be able to advocate for yourself, tell your story. Yeah, there may be some, there are going to be accidents. That's just the nature of accidents. They happen. So it's how you frame the story and how you talk about, the due diligence to reduce the frequency in order to control the severity, right?
Absolutely. And, plaintiff's attorneys want to paint the worst picture of you. There's getting into collision, and then there's getting into collision and then being able to show negligence. And then they're getting into a collision allowing them to show negligence, and then allowing them to show gross negligence, which means you knew there was a problem, you chose not to do anything about it, and this happened anyway. And you definitely do not want to get into that situation, which again is why training is so important. It shows that you've been making an effort all along.
And you mentioned in this hiring too, because it starts, I mean, it really starts pre-hiring and policies, but it definitely starts as you are bringing on new drivers.
100%. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've asked the question when I speak to a fleet that I'm just, you know, getting to know. I ask about what is their training program, and their answer that they give me is, oh, well, we only hire experienced drivers. And that tells me a couple things. First of all, they're not doing any training. They're just expecting a driver to come in, they're handing them the keys, and they're putting them out there on the road. And they're also trusting the last company to do their job for them. And so my question to them is, do you know if they were ever actually trained on the job? What bad habits have they picked up from that last job? And, you know, were they trained poorly? Maybe the last company did training, but they trained them the wrong way to do things, or they trained them in how to beat the system. So my question for you all is, are you actually willing to allow some other company, some other safety manager, some other dispatcher, some other company owner to run your fleet? And if the answer is no, then you need to make sure that you have proper training protocols put in place when you bring that driver on. And don't just expect that because they have years and years of experience, they're going to do the right thing when they get out there on the road. You want to make sure you teach them what your idea of the right thing is and to provide that training to them.
I think I hear commonly, especially in our boot camp event, you know, all the time, whether it's training or, you know, accident mitigation, trying to preempt negligence, it's commonly, oh, we already do that. We already do that. So I think the question for you, Bill, is what's the difference between we already do that and we already do that well or effectively?
Yeah, and that's a great question. You know, there are a lot of folks, and I've heard that many times too. Oh yeah, we do that. We do that. And one of the responses that I'll give them is, okay, show me. Show me how you do that. Show me what you do. And it's better to answer that question when a consultant is talking to you than when you're sitting in a deposition trying to answer that question. Um, that's the wrong time to learn that you've been doing things wrong the whole way. So, you know, I've seen a lot of fleets that have had training systems in place and they just didn't use them. You know, and I've worked for, you know, companies in the past too that, you know, you pay a lot of money for these things and these systems in place and maybe this software over here, and you're not using them to the fullest extent. We see the same things with monitoring telematics. You know, maybe you've got a Motive or a Samsara ELD system or Geotab or whatever it is that you have out there. Those systems have all these different reports and all these different ways of looking at how drivers, you know, can be, you know, graded and scored on their safety. And I hear it all the time that, oh yeah, we look at that. Oh yeah, we look at that score. But what is in that score? What are you looking at in that score? What are you actually doing about it to act on it to improve it? So, you know, lip service is is not enough, especially when it comes to claims and severity and having to answer to it in a deposition or a trial.
Mhm.
So here's kind of what good training looks like. First of all, there should be some sort of formal orientation process, not just pencil whip forms, not just you know, we bring the driver in, we hand them the book, sign it, and send them on their way. It should be something that's documented. This is how we do it, making sure that they go through each proper step before they're actually given the keys to drive their first load. So your orientation should be formal. In addition to that, you should have annual or periodic refresher training for your drivers, all of your drivers. And this is where I hear where fleet safety managers want to pull their hair out because they have these experienced drivers and maybe they've been with the company for 10, 15 years. And the driver's asking the question, why do I have to do that? You know, and it's a fair question, you know, from the driver's perspective. Like maybe I haven't, you know, I've got, you know, so many million miles of safe driving. I haven't had a violation in the last 2 years. Why do I have to do this training? And part of it is just to remind them it's a refresher. We all fall into bad habits. We all get complacent. Maybe you'll pick up a little tidbit out of this thing that you hadn't thought about in a while. The other thing is that if you don't do that, if you don't show that it's systematic, it can come back to bite the company when something bad actually happens. And sometimes that's just the best way to explain it to the driver. Like, listen, I understand you are absolutely one of the best drivers that we've had for many, many years. You do an awesome job. And so what I need you to do, I need you to be, a great example for all these other drivers who clearly are not as good as you are that have to take this training. Just do me a favor, be a leader. Let's take this training. Let's protect everybody. Sometimes that's just the best way of doing it. In addition to that, there should be some sort of targeted training. You should be looking at the violations that you're having, seeing where they're becoming more frequent, and assigning training that ties in with that. I do see some folks who use training management systems, or maybe they have their own stuff that say, "Oh yeah, we train on this, we train on this, we train on this," and in reality, it has nothing to do with what their operations are. They're just going through motions and checking boxes. Make sure that your training actually applies to your operation and that it's actually targeted to the problems that you're having. And hey, we've all heard that everybody learns differently. There are auditory learners, there are visual learners, there are hands-on learners. So try to find, multiple ways of training your drivers. Learning management systems are awesome. It's an awesome way. There's visual, there's auditory. Sometimes there's questions that you have to answer, in-person one-on-ones, driver safety meetings, or going out to the yard and saying, "Hey, show me how you do your pre-trip inspection and let's talk about each step."
Oh yeah, nothing beats a hands-on.
Yes, absolutely. So use multiple methods, but here's the thing: document everything you do. And we got a slide a little bit later that'll talk a lot about that. But if don't, no matter how good your memory is, don't depend on your memory of when you did stuff. And let's face it, you might have moved on to another job by the time something comes up, and no one's going to remember if you had a discussion with a driver. Make sure that you document everything that you do, all the training that you do, and keep that somewhere where people can find it.
Bill, sometimes I think the word training gets overused and maybe needs to be combined with just plain information exchange.
Yes.
And I'll use an example: personal conveyance. Is that if you need you definitely need to explain to your driver what your policy is and what's allowable and reasonable under personal conveyance, and what the reality of personal conveyance is. That's more information exchange than it is training. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's
And as a carrier, it's their responsibility to exchange that information that's very clear, very precise, and documented.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of carriers that have driver handbooks, or they call them policies or procedures manuals. Everybody calls it a little bit differently, and there's some debates about what they should be called. But there are some that you know they say they issue them to the drivers, and there's no documentation that they ever did. That's that information exchange too. I think training would be taking it to another level of saying, "Hey, here's this document, and let's walk through this and talk through this and answer questions and so forth on it. And if you don't understand it, let's get through it." But yes, information exchange is also crucial, making sure that drivers have that as well. Now, the good, bad, and the ugly. Um,
Yeah.
I've dealt with a lot of fleets out there, and there are a lot of them who are trying their best, but they're just completely missing the mark. And you can see the graphic there, with people trying to shoot arrows at the bullseye, and they've all completely missed. Some of them even aren't even on the target. Um, I've talked to a lot of fleets who say, we train, but they have absolutely no proof of it. When I was working for the insurance company and doing kind of safety assessments on these fleets, in order to share information with our underwriting team, I would ask, what is your training? And they say, "Oh yeah, we train our drivers. We train our drivers," but they have absolutely no proof. And when you ask them for specifics, they just have none. It's like, "Oh yeah, well, when things come up, we do this or we do that." Or they'll only do some sort of orientation, and then there's no follow-up after that. And commonly what I see is fleets, their orientation basically exists of making sure that drivers are filling out the necessary forms for, their employment or their 1099 or for getting paid and all that other stuff. But there's no actual training as far as how they're supposed to operate a vehicle. Here's your manual, sign it. Here's your forms, sign them, send them on their way. Some of them will use the same generic course every single year. I remember when I first started doing driver safety meetings around the country, I came to a driver safety meetings and I would have the drivers come in and they're like, "You're not just going to show us the same video we've seen the last 3 years, are you?" That is a sign of folks just going through the motions and doing the same generic thing. Make sure that your training is actually accurate, it's up to date, it's consistent with what's going on in the world. Don't just use the same, video or presentation or talk that you've used every single other time. Drivers are drawing it out. They're not learning anything from it. Make sure it's current, it's relevant, and it's engaging. Another problem is there's just no proof of it. Nobody's documented, nobody's recorded it. They say they do it, but they're not able to show you any information of when or where it happened or who was there. And finally, that there's no corrective action. They have policies and procedures in place or driver guidelines in place. They say they have, a 3-strike policy or a progressive discipline policy, but they don't actually follow it. Drivers are getting the same violations all the time, and it just keeps getting repeated because there's no corrective action that's ever taken place. So, having worked for, the insurance companies and taking a look and trying to analyze and get the real story of a fleet, some of the things that we look for, and some of the things that I would report back to, our underwriters are whether or not the company actually has top-down support. And for those of you who are safety managers out there, I want to talk to you specifically right now. I get the struggle that you want to do the right things. You want to implement new programs. You want to get new technology in there, but you're struggling to get executive buy-in. Maybe because it's too expensive. Maybe it's because you might have to let some drivers go that people just don't want to let go, or there's a concern that drivers are going to leave if you try to implement this. I get it. I've been there. And I've talked to many safety managers who are going through the same thing. One of the things that insurance companies are looking for is whether or not there's actually top-down support from the person who's actually making the decisions. We look for whether or not the policies actually match the practice. I've seen 300-page driver manuals and driver policies, and I know full well that company is never going to be able to keep up with that and to enforce everything that's in there. Nor is any driver ever going to read it or fully understand everything that's in there.
Well, Bill, I will inject. I'll tell you who will read those is the plaintiff's attorneys, and they will read them very carefully and find plenty of reasons to declare you irresponsible for not following those policies.
100%. Absolutely. Everything that you put in those policies and procedures manuals or driver guidelines or driver handbooks is open to discovery. And if it's in there and you say you're going to do it, you better be doing it. And if you're not going to do it, then you need to change the wording and change how that policy is written. And so one of the things that I've done and helped folks with in the past is, rewriting policies and guidelines and so forth, so that it's something that's going to hold up for you in court and that you're actually going to be able to act on. It's reasonable, and it's stuff that drivers can understand as well. It's a great point, Mark. Things need to be clear. They shouldn't be written in, legalese and everything, what drivers aren't going to understand necessarily. And you also need to make sure that the expectations you set for your team are clear, that what your bar is as far as quality and safety and customer service. Make sure those expectations are set clearly as well. And that everybody, drivers, staff, dispatchers, anyone in your organization understands that and holds themselves to that and is held to that. Again, training, coaching, and corrective action It's a cycle, and it should be an ongoing cycle. You should always be analyzing, what is our training? Is it working? What do we need to change? And then regular review of those things. Again, assess what you're doing.
Bill, one other comment on that. One of the best practices that I've witnessed in the last couple of years is the usage of dash cam, near miss dash cams from your fleet, and putting those into a customized content that send out and just ask the question, what would you have done in this situation? What did the driver do right? What did the driver do wrong? What would you have done? It's been very effective. It gets their input on the training reality.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite things to do in driver safety meetings when when I go out and that's one of my favorite things to do, by the way, is to actually be in a room with the drivers and just talk to them and have that dialogue, is ask, show a quick video and say, what would you have done? What did the driver do wrong? What did the driver do right? And it's amazing the discussion you get, and the different ideas and the different ways of looking at things. And that can be extremely helpful with your team to get that out and to have the drivers talk to each other and say, oh no, I wouldn't have done that. Well, I would have, and here's why. And driver experience starts to come out. And they actually start to kind of mentor each other too, as long as you're there to moderate it and to make sure that it's being done, in the right way. But yeah, videos and stuff are great. And I like to encourage the fleets that I've worked with and especially if you're struggling with getting drivers to adopt and be okay with putting cameras in their trucks, is to show the videos where the driver did everything right to avoid a collision. Show that, attaboys and attagirls, show those videos and say, this is a driver who did everything they could do to avoid a collision. Awesome job. And use those. That helps create the buy-in. And then, also ask the drivers, excuse me, what if we didn't have the video? Maybe a collision happened and the camera showed that that collision was not preventable by the driver who was in the truck. Ask your drivers, what if we didn't have this video? What would a witness have said? Or what could a witness have said? Maybe a witness that just drove by but didn't stop and they called in later. What could they have said about this that the video could have proved, that the driver did everything they were supposed to do? So yeah, dash cam videos are great for training. Some high impact training topics. This is just a starting list. There's so many, but obviously defensive driving, space management, and speed. We want to talk about distracted driving, and I'm going to get on a soapbox here for a second. When you talk about distracted driving, don't just talk about cell phones, because that's, every time I ask someone, hey, do you have a distracted driving policy? And they say, oh yeah, we have a policy that says they're not allowed to use their cell phone. There are a million other distractions that are out there. And we practice this at one of the driving schools I work at. It's a crash prevention school all the time. Where in addition to a cell phone, we'll get going, at a high speed, and I'll just ask them to change the temperature on the AC or on the heat, and then give them a stimulus where they're supposed to be hitting the brakes, and they'll miss it because they're looking down at a knob. So there's so many other distractions out there, not just cell phones. Cell phones are important, electronic devices, that kind of thing. But talk about all distractions when you're doing distracted driving training. That's a huge one.
I saw some custom content done recently on distracted driving danger zones, entering an intersection or construction zone where everybody slows down, and the general driving public, that's an invite to pick up your phone, and so you have to acknowledge and recognize this. You're entering a distracted driving danger zone, and it was very effective, very well done.
Yeah. Yeah.
In other words, there's a lot of drivers out there that are driving distracted. I think we would all agree with that.
Oh, 100%. And one of the things that's probably been the most eye-opening for me over the years is I'm one of those folks who's never going to ask a driver to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So when we've talked about, adopting dash cams and that kind of thing, I've actually had one installed in my own personal vehicle along with an ELD. So if I was on a road trip, I was logging my miles and making sure I took my half-hour break and all that other stuff. But those dash cams will highlight everything that you've been doing that you didn't realize you were doing. And Mark, you're absolutely right. When you get to a situation where your vehicle slows down or you come to a stop or you're at that red light, the temptation is there to start doing all those things that you're not supposed to be doing when you're going down the highway. Those situations can be just as dangerous. You never know what's going to happen around those areas. Pedestrians walking out in front of you, workers in a construction zone, you name it. That's a great point. And I would encourage, if you're a safety manager out there or the owner of a fleet or anything, and you're asking your drivers to put a dash cam in their trucks, be willing to do it yourself. It'll be eye-opening for you. You'll find that you become a safer driver as well. You understand the system a whole lot better because you're actually using it, and you're setting that example for them. And it creates much better buy-in when you say, "Hey, I'm willing to do it too. I'm asking you to do it, and I'm willing to do it myself." So if we go to the next slide. Um, there's three terms on this slide that I want to talk about: compliance, safety. Sorry, I just completely lost, and insurability. They all kind of go together, but at the same time, they're all just a little bit different. Compliance is meeting the minimum FMCSA requirements. You're doing what you have to do because you have to do it. You're checking the boxes. You're making sure you got all your forms in place. You're crossing your T's, you're dotting your I's. Everything is in order. Safety to me is what actually happens day to day. It's behavior, it's decisions, and it's your culture. And your insurability depends on those two things. It looks at how attractive you are to insurers based on your compliance and your safety, because that makes whether or not your losses are predictable. It's also going to take a look at whether or not you're defensible in litigation. If you don't have those other two things in place and you get sued, it's going to be a nightmare if you're not as defensible as other companies. So,
You speak in Mark's language there. He has, as you know, a great presentation on compliance versus culture. I love the addition of insurability because it is such a key part of all of this now. It's all integrated.
yes,
And documentation.
absolutely.
Excited about this slide. Tim Luco is in chat, and Tim, thank you for joining us. He said, "Hey, let's talk a bit about the processes and manuals and how important it is that you do business the way you say you're going to do business. In other words, not only are you documenting things, but you ahead of time, you have the process and procedures and that you're sharing them out and that you're following to the letter. So, along the lines of documentation, I know you mean, keeping track of training, keeping track of conversations, but it starts with policy too. And it's a great call out to him. Very important.
Yes, absolutely. And those plaintiffs' attorneys are going to look at those things and they're going to read your policy out and they're going to ask you, do you do that? And if they ask you that question, look out, because chances are they found a spot where you didn't do that. So absolutely making sure that you're documenting everything, that your documentation is clear, it's concise, and that you can follow it. Awesome call out. And along the lines of documentation, this is one of my favorite lines, and I see it, on posters when I go down and visit my friends at Infinity. And I might not have gotten the exact wording, but if it's not documented, dated, or signed, or if you can't find it, it didn't happen. Can't tell you how many times I've asked safety managers about their training, what have you done, or policies, corrective action, anything. And they say, oh yeah, we do that. Well, show me. And they can't. And likewise, if you're doing driver safety meetings, are you having all your drivers sign in? Are you making sure that you're documenting the topics that you talked about? And, are you losing that sign-in sheet? Are you keeping track of it? Is it kept away somewhere where people can find it if need be? Because if you can't find that sign-in sheet, that safety meeting never happened. And that's one of the very first lessons I learned as a safety consultant and as a safety director, as I was told, this sign-in sheet is probably more important than the meeting itself, because if you can't find it, you never had the meeting. So make sure that you're documenting everything you do, including your training plans, what you're training them on, any tests or quizzes that you're giving out, making sure that you're keeping track of that, and any corrective actions and follow-ups that you have. And I know that Infinity has an awesome product as far as keeping track of training and documentation and so forth. So
We do. Never lost a record. Thank you for that.
that's right. And you know, I can say I've worked with Infinity in the past and needed some records that were, you know, a few years old, and they were able to pull it up for me, no problem. So that was awesome. Um, so let's go back to insurance. How does all this stuff affect your rate and your renewal? Because that's, you know, what we're here for. You know, how can I look great in front of my insurance company? Strong programs mean that you are going to have more markets that are willing to compete for your business. They are going to want your business. If you are a top quality customer, you know, low losses, low claims frequency, great policies in place, great safety management structure, insurers are going to want to insure you because they know they're not going to, well, they feel they're pretty sure they're not going to have to, you know, pay out as much in claims, and you're going to be profitable business for them. So you're going to get more quotes, and the more quotes you get, the better chance you have of getting a lower rate, which is the pricing potential. You're going to get more favorable terms and deductibles. You know, every company looks at this, and it's not just about the rate that you pay, but also how much you have to pay up front, what your deductibles might be. And, you know, the better you are, the more willing that insurance companies are going to be willing to offer you different products. And also your flexibility for growth. You know, insurance companies don't want to see that you're planning to grow, you know, exponentially over the next few years. But if you have all the right systems in place, if you have that foundation in place, then building on that is a little bit of a safer risk for insurance companies. So if you're looking to grow, you want to make sure that you're looking favorable to your insurance company as well. Weak programs, let's face it, there are some insurance companies, they won't even look at you. And you're just going to get harder and harder to find a company that will even insure you. And the harder it is to find companies to insure you, your rates are going up. It's going to get more and more and more expensive. Think about it as just your basic, you know, credit score. You know, if you've got a great credit score, you're going to get lower interest rates on that loan that you need to take out. It's kind of the same thing with insurance companies. You know, the more favorable you are, the lower rates you're going to get. Less favorable you are, people aren't going to want to work with you, and they're going to raise your rates.
And I think it's important to say too, it's a vicious market out there, and insurance carriers are exiting, you know, commercial auto liability, and we need them in the market. So we, as a transportation industry, all together, rising tides lift all boats, right? We all need to do better, and it's hard, but bring all fleets along into the safety world, because as we all become more insurable and better risks, it's going to help out with the insurance marketplace as well. We need insurance carriers.
100%. And in addition to insurance carriers leaving the market leaving the trucking space, there are a lot of insurance companies who just simply aren't going to renew business. And sometimes it's even been, you know, good business for them. But for some reason, market factors or some sort of red flag, they've just decided we're not going to renew you next year, and you need to go out and find somebody else. And of course, finding somebody else when more and more people are pulling out just exacerbates that situation and makes it worse. So here are some things that you want to show your insurance company or your agent when it's time to renew your insurance. Obviously, any evidence of training. You want to show that you're making the best possible effort to improve your fleet year after year after year. The same thing with any policy changes that you've made to make your fleet safer. Obviously, you're going to want to look at the incidents and the CSA metrics. If you've done some improvements and they're going down, make sure that you tell your story. Don't let somebody else do it for you. Mm-hmm. And any technology that you've added, maybe you've added dash cams over the last year. Maybe you've added asset trackers to your trailers. Maybe there's some sort of other technology, some software that you're using to monitor your drivers better. It doesn't necessarily need to be a piece of equipment that you've put on your trucks. Maybe there's a great software that you're using now to monitor your drivers or your maintenance or something along those lines. Make sure you tell that story to your insurers and to your agents to make sure that you get the best possible rates and the most options. And then, again, strengthening your training program and any of your safety programs in general is an ongoing process. It's a cycle. And if you look at the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, go to their website, they've actually got some great things on the safety management cycle. But you want to constantly assess where you're at. You want to plan for any changes. Hey, I want to do this in the next quarter, the next year, next 2 years. Plan for that stuff. Actually act on it. Document what you did, and then look back and say, hey, we did this. What changes happened? What went well? What didn't go well? Assess that and start all over in order to strengthen your training program. Some things that you want to make sure, here's some tips. When you're working with insurers, be transparent about what your challenges and your actions are. I've seen so many times where, trucking companies are coming to potential insurers and they're telling the story that they think the insurer wants to hear, but it's not the real story. And that becomes very, very clear with just a few questions. So be open, be transparent. If you're being challenged with something, tell them and say, hey, this is something that we've seen in the past. This is something that we're working on. This is what we've done to implement it. And these are the results that we've seen so far. We're not where we want to be, but we're, making progress to getting there. Be open about that. Share those plans, share your training calendars, make sure they know that you actually have something in place that you're trying to do. Invite your agent or your insurer to see your program. And I hear it a lot. I'm not trying to, not trying to speak poorly about insurance agents, but I hear a lot that, we only hear about them, hear from, at time of renewal. Communicate with them, say, hey, we just implemented this new thing. I'd love for you to see it. Let's start planning earlier on for our renewal next year. And then if your insurance company, or potential insurance company is a telematics-based insurer, ask them how that score is calculated and how you can improve it. And this can be very important because there's a lot of companies out there that are saying, hey, we need your telematics. We score you based on your telematics. Make sure they can also actually explain. It's a two-way street. Make sure they can explain what's in that score, how can we improve that score, and how are we going to be, graded or judged based on that score year after year after year. And also ask for their safety team's commitment to you as well. What are you offering to us throughout the year? From your safety or your risk management team as services for us throughout the year. Because remember, your insurance company isn't just renewing or interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So make sure that you have all that information that you need as well.
I think what I'm hearing throughout this is, I'm surprised I always knew you go into this and it's all about numbers, right? How many incidents, how many accidents, crashes, CSA. There's so much that's data driven in this, but I keep hearing you say storytelling. It's about telling your story. It's about the right positioning. And really that's everything in this world, right? It's the PR. So everyone, if you're in safety, if you're the owner, just add another hat to your head because now you have to be in PR too and tell your story the right way for insurance.
Absolutely. And, to kind of, jump onto that point as well. I have on many occasions had underwriters say, hey, we're looking at this particular risk. We're looking at this particular fleet. And there's either something on the back of my, the hair on the back of my neck is kind of standing up about something, but I can't find it on paper. Or I really, really like this fleet, but what's on paper just, it's not as good as we'd like it to be. Can you meet with this fleet? Can you find out some more information? And I can't tell you how many times I've either been able to help an underwriter kind of calm them down about that thing that they weren't quite sure about and say, hey, I've actually visited with this fleet. I've talked to them. They've shown me their operation. I think it's a really solid risk that maybe we shouldn't pass up this time around. Um, you know, conversely, sometimes there's some that are great that look great on paper, and maybe they've just been lucky that they haven't been inspected that many times on the road. That's why they don't have any violations. Because when I get there, their equipment is horrible. They have no safety management system in place, and I don't know how they've gotten by this time. But you have a chance to tell your story, and more oftentimes than not, things that are on paper don't fully tell your story. Maybe you've got a fatality that's on paper, but maybe that was something where a vehicle ran into the back of your truck while it was legally stopped, exactly where it was supposed to be, and somebody else ran into the back of that. That story needs to be shared. And there are companies out there who will only be looking at paper and saying, well, nope, they had a fatality last year. We're not even going to look at quoting them. Make sure that you're able to tell your story. So here's the thing, kind of a little self-reflection, some mirror time is what I like to call it, is it looking at your own operation. If you were the underwriter for an insurance company, would you be confident taking a risk on your program? Can you prove what you've trained on, who you've trained, when you did it? Do you actually adjust your training to make sure that it's based on what's going on in your own operation, or are you just going through the motions? And finally, if you're on the witness stand and you're called to defend your company and your own personal actions, would you be comfortable explaining what you're doing about your safety program? Would you be comfortable selling your safety program to a jury? Those are some questions that if you ask yourself those on a regular basis, or if you print that slide off right there, hang it on your bulletin board, put it on your second monitor, however you do it these days, post-it note, ask yourselves these questions on a regular basis. And it's, to me, it's going to really help you motivate you and making sure that you are the most insurable company out there.
And I think that last point, Bill, especially is, how would this look? Whatever you're doing, how would this look to a jury? How would this present to a jury? Is it consistent? Is it reasonable? Is it documented? How is it going to look to a jury? If I have to sit down and defend it, if I'm, on Robert's team and I'm in deposition, Robert was in chat saying a team member, was asked about the handbook, and it's an uncomfortable seat to be in. But if you feel confident in explaining it, then you've already maybe won the battle, or at least you're pretty far along. David in chat said, nowadays compliance with regulations is just the minimum standard when it comes to lawsuits. So there's always that question, what more could you have done? What are you doing beyond compliance? So yeah, if it passes the jury test, the jury litmus test, then probably in a good spot for your insurers as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, the mirror test is huge. Look at yourself, look at what you're doing, and ask yourselves, if I was sitting on the jury, what would I think about this company?
It's great. It's a
Say
great
this: if you can't tell your story, the plaintiff's attorney will tell it for you, and it's not going to be pretty. That's fact.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the last person you want to be telling your story.
Colleague, yeah.
I know we're getting right up on time.
Yeah.
This is the last thing, just some key takeaways. Just as a reminder that insurers are looking beyond just the compliance and the paperwork. They're looking at your culture and the training programs that you're doing, because training can reduce the severity and frequency of their losses. They want to be profitable. They want to make money on you every year. If they lose money on you every year, they're going to be moving on. Make sure that everything that you do is structured, it's documented, it's dated. And most importantly, you control many of the factors that are shaping your loss trends. So look at those things that you can control and improve on every single one of them, and you're going to make yourself more insurable year after year.
Bill, thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a great presentation. We always love having you. If there are questions, please pop them in chat. We've been having some good conversation over there. I haven't seen questions come through specifically, but wow, that was a good one. Actually, I have a question for you while people are thinking, and I think Mark may have a couple. Mine is really looking ahead the next couple of months. We have National Work Zone Awareness Week. We have International Road Check, and the focus areas, of course, are cargo securement. And there's always something related to ELDs, logging, tampering. And I saw cargo securement pop up a couple of times in your presentation. The common topics that you should be training on are almost always featured in International Road Check Blitz. So, any tips or advice as we enter these awareness weeks and blitzes?
The biggest tip I can give you for all of these awareness weeks is don't wait until the week comes in order to tell your drivers about it. And I've seen that so many times. Um, you want to plan more than a month in advance for any of these awareness weeks, because you want to be able to have a chance to take a look at your equipment. You want to make sure that you have a chance to talk to your drivers, and if there are any types of deficiencies or things that you want to kind of go over ahead of time, you want to leave yourself that buffer zone. So 30 days, 60 days in advance. Look at those calendars, put those things on your calendars as reminders year after year after year. Look for them. And don't wait until that week, because I see that all the time, and they're like, drivers aren't showing up because they know that there's a blitz outside the port or something along those
Right.
lines. Yeah.
Very good. Mark, any questions for Bill while we have him?
Well, one quick one. I know there's a lot of different weather conditions up in the Northeast. First, we had 90 degrees down here this weekend. Do you have any recommendations for the clients that are on the line here for some customized training, seasonally based?
Absolutely. If you're down in the South, down in Texas, where the heat is insane, you want to make sure that you're putting training out about that type of, how to deal in, hot weather, how hot weather affects, your tires, your brakes, all that other stuff. If you're up where I'm at in New England right now, rain, snow, fog. Look at those seasons and assign that training based on those things. Obviously winter comes to a lot of folks throughout the year. So as you're getting, again, don't wait until the middle of January if you're in Minnesota to talk about winter weather driving. Talk about it, before that first snow comes. And I know from living up there in the past that it can come on September 1st. So plan for that stuff, and make sure that it's catered to where your drivers are running and where you're located.
Bill, thank you. We appreciate you. I'm, of course, got to do a plug on behalf of Infinity, because all of this, or a lot of this, comes back to information exchange, communication, documentation, training. If you are frequent, consistent, proactive, and you require it, you're going to be in a much better position when it comes to seeking favorable insurance rates, maybe one day even getting into a captive and sitting in front of that jury and defending yourself and your company. So we believe that training is important, and no matter the job, whether you're in the driver's seat or in the maintenance shop, or anywhere within the company, everyone has underlying behaviors that make their role successful or not. And it's those behaviors that can get off track. Complacency, human nature, can get people off track. So frequent, consistent training, very important. We would love to invite you all to see our platform, kick the tires, so to speak, and take a look. We have new and updated content every month on all of these topics. In fact, we're rolling out some content for Work Zone Awareness Week. We just rolled out a new construction video last month. And this month, coming up, a couple of topics for road check, for cargo securement, for logging. So if you'd be interested in taking a look, we'd love to have you and love to talk with you more. Bill, thank you. We appreciate you. Have you back again soon. And everyone, as a reminder, we will send along a replay of the webinar today. And if you need it, you can also request an NATME certificate for your certification points for attending the webinar. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bill.